Good evening. Welcome to the Kill Screen. This is the third and final event in the Subtext series, presented by the Pantograph Punch in association with Q Theater. My name is Steven Toussaint, and it is my absolute pleasure to be here tonight with this extraordinary and diverse group of artists. It's not every day you get a writer, a songwriter, an illustrator, a playwright on the same stage, sharing and comparing the unique experiences they've acquired as makers in very different art forms. But if there's one thing that artists of all stripes, I think, have in common, it's what Frank Kermode has called the sense of an ending. I think we've grown accustomed in events like this to hearing artists, musicians, writers speak about their beginnings, the feeling of turning the ignition, stepping on the accelerator when it comes to new projects. We're far less likely, I think, to hear them talk about what it feels like to hit the brakes, to find out what causes them to do so, what makes them feel like they have arrived. To use another metaphor, the one that provides us with the title of our event tonight, what does the kill screen look like to artists in such different disciplines as you see before you? All of the video game nerds in the audience will be completely familiar with this, but for the rest of you, the kill screen is the level in a video game where the player can go no further because of a programming error or design oversight. The game sort of malfunctions. It'll crash and further play becomes impossible. The most famous example of this is, of course, Pac-Man. It's not a game that you can technically win. At a certain point, you can simply go no further. Now, over the next hour, we're going to discuss whether we can talk in the same way about works of art. When you conclude a story, record a song, sign off on a comic strip, draw the curtain on a performance, can we say that we're really finished, that something has been completed, or has further play simply become impossible? To answer these questions, and hopefully many more, let me introduce our panel. To my immediate left, Chelsea Jade Metcalf is a songwriter trying to figure out the sexiest way to cry. An art school dropout, Chelsea was the recipient of the Critics' Choice Prize at the VNZMAs in 2012 and attended the Red Bull Music Academy Tokyo in 2014. She is now embarking on a top-lining career in Los Angeles, where her work has already been rejected by Rihanna. Which I'm hoping that, I don't know how, but I hope we get to that at some point tonight. Her latest release is called Lowbrow, and you can download it now on iTunes. Toby Morris is an Auckland-based illustrator, designer, and cartoonist known for nonfiction, often autobiographical comics. In 2013, he released the book Don't Puke on Your Dad, a year in the life of a new father, and is currently working on the monthly comic series The Pencil Sword for the website The Wireless, as well as the weekly current affairs column in collaboration with Toby Manhire called That Is the Question for Radio New Zealand. Courtney Meredith is a writer and performer currently completing her first book of short stories, Tale of a Taniwha. Her play Rushing Dolls has won a number of awards and was published by Playmarket in 2012. And selected by Silo Theater for Working Titles 2015. She launched her first book of poetry, Brown Girls in Bright Red Lipstick, at the 2012 Frankfurt Book Fair. She was the Bleibtreu, is that how you say that? Bleibtreu Berlin Writer in Residence 2011, a delegate to London for the British Council in 2012, and a guest of the BBC to the House of Lords in 2014. Her poetry and prose have been translated into Italian, German, Dutch, French, and Bahasa Indonesian. She has an upcoming residency at the Silt Foundation in northern Germany for 2016. Last but not least, Eli Kent is a writer and performer based in Auckland. He is the author of a number of award-winning plays. Rubber Turkey, for example, won him the Peter Harcourt Award for Outstanding New Playwright of the Year at the 2008 Chapman Tripp Awards. The Intricate Art of Actually Caring, in which he also acted, won Best Theater in the NZ Fringe Festival 2009. In addition to his ongoing work with the Playground Collective, Eli is currently working on two more shows for Auckland Theatre Company, as well as developing several film and TV projects. His play, All Your Wants and Needs Fulfilled Forever, is currently on at Q Theatre. We're very privileged tonight to be sitting in it. It's a story that has been rewritten over and over, transformed every time. Would you please join me in welcoming our four panelists? Okay, so I'm hoping that we can get to this idea of this difference between finishing and ending over the course of the evening. We might kind of revolve around that. But I want to start first by posing a question to all of you that thinks about endings in a slightly different way. My question is, how do you know when something that you're working on has failed?
Can I approach the question? I know within the first 30 seconds whether I'm going to enjoy working on it and therefore get to the end or a finishing point. However, if I start a pursuit, I have to see it through to exercise the muscle.
Is that similar? Is that similar for any of you other guys?
That's a tough one, especially if you're working with a project team, you know? There's a few people that you're relying on. I guess for me, personally, I try at all costs to avoid failure. Probably most artists here do. I am that artist who has rung CNZ. I rung the advisor and said, look, do you think this is an idea that you would fund? I'm constantly trying to run defence between my ideas, the feasibility of realising them, whether there's a market at the end. But I guess for me, the overriding desire to pump content into the world, which is diverse and probably has a feminist slant and does have a woman of Indigenous grounding at the centre of it, tends to push me beyond the simple question of have I failed or not. I'm kind of in this place of as much of it as I can kind of imagine the wave just lapping at the shore. I'm like, just keep going. As much of it as I can put out there. Just continue on, little wave.
I found, I guess, it's a hard thing to learn is to make the call kind of early on. Like I think there's often a moment that you realise, and it's usually is a moment that you're like, this is not that great sometimes. And I think the hardest thing is having the sort of the balls early on to be like, well, I got to start again. Sometimes I know out of sort of sheer bloody-mindedness or out of disorganisation, deadlines, things like that, I've sort of been like, well, I just got to see it through and make the best of it. But I think as I go on sort of learning to make that call, it's, the hard call to sort of kill something and start again, even if that means staying up all night or whatever for a deadline or something. But
I guess it's really only failure if you sort of accept that all the time and all the work that you've put into it has nonetheless you still have to abandon it, and that I guess that's just something you can refuse to do. Eli,
I feel like if it feels like failure if it feels like a waste of time. So like for me, I mean I've never while shows and like there have been shows that weren't ideal or that weren't I don't feel like I've failed in a sense because every time you put it in front of an audience there are things that you wish would have gone better but you don't. I've never thought like, God, I wish the whole last month had never happened and we'd never shown this thing and I'm that's so humiliated, although that still that could happen. But I'd say, yeah, it's in front of an audience, because for me, there have been things that I've written that I've abandoned really early. As soon as someone read them, or like we did a reading, this play's never going to work. This is bad. I'm not going to hide it forever. Yeah, but in those cases, I didn't follow them through to far enough to really feel like gutted about having failed at them.
So there's a certain stage that it's all or nothing. Then you've passed that threshold, and
I think so. And then past that threshold, I'm generally just really glad for the learning experience. Like, take everything that went wrong as an opportunity to do better next time, I guess.
We're in an interesting moment too. We're in a moment of failing forward being quite sexy. Leaning in, like, what went wrong there? Lean in, just lean in. We're starting to talk now about leadership from a sense of failure. It's just a different time to be a creative. People seem to be quite interested in the things that didn't go right with your career, and they want to know about that. So failure it's changed. Failure has a market now. Yeah.
I hadn't thought about it that way before. Thanks. Chelsea, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the production and the recording of Lowbrow. Was there a point, was there a specific point where you knew this is ready, this is done?
Yep. The Lowbrow was a very unique outlier in terms of process. I had never had quite such a fluid process. I'd never met the person that I was working with until the day, and then we started working at 12, and then we finished the song at midnight, and it was finished. So that never ever happens. But I guess I don't know how to paint the process as being more interesting than that, but it was like.
Right, I guess I can kind of asking the question. I'm sort of expecting this sort of timeline, sort of
Okay.
At 7 p.m. we hit the third verse.
At 3 p.m. we had a burrito.
Right, which is really instrumental to the process, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So, but you're saying this recording of this song was a very unique experience.
Very unique, yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about the production of Beacons? Was that a much more arduous, painstaking?
Entirely more arduous. Because for Beacons, which was an EP I put out last year, I had been working on it since 2011, and but the stuff that prevented me from getting to this day, I guess one person's finished is another person's I don't know, diary entry. like someone might consider something finished is when it's out or when you put it out. I had that in the can for 3 years, so and it was strange. I considered that to it basically, because I was learning my own language. That's why that took so long, and I didn't have. I had to find a way to articulate from an art school background how I wanted to make sound at a level that was palatable for people who knew about music. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the reason I got to make that at all, because I made most of it in New York, was because I made a really self-indulgent project at art school where I had kind of been abandoned by my bandmates a little bit, and so I made this self-indulgent project where I just recorded lots of shit songs in a week, and then all of the credits were just assigned to me and fractured out so that it was really clear that I'd done everything myself. But and it was very low quality, and then I for a performance piece I asked everyone why they deserved to hear it. And then on the back of that, I dropped out. I was chased out. No, someone heard it, and he had, I guess, he was kind of a masochist, and he invited me to come and stay with him and play with sounds, and Sorry, I'm monopolizing,
No,
but
this is very interesting. We have
um,
plenty of time.
that's why. But yeah, it took so long because my standards were very high. Like I totally identify with that, and that the thing I mentioned before was like about exercising the muscle is something I've learned very recently. That I can't like hold on to these 6 songs and like not continue working. Like it would be a life wasted.
I'm interested in this one of these ideas that you bring up about sort of the external pressures, sort of, and how that maybe brings on or delays the kill screen coming for you. I want to pose this question to Toby, but this I think could be something that others have dealt with in a similar way, and I'd be interested to hear your perspectives as well. But you're writing The Pencil Sword, which is a regular feature, and now this weekly column with Toby Manhire. How does the presence of a deadline like that, a weekly deadline, and also there's the topical nature of what you're doing. You're drawing and writing, dealing with things that are happening in the world right now.
Yeah.
How does that affect your sense of conclusion, your sense of an ending?
Well, I guess it introduces a really practical and sort of pragmatic reason to finish, which is the deadline. It's a big change for me. Like, it's only been really the last sort of year that I've been doing the Pencil Sword that's quite a new thing to have my sort of creative projects tied up in a physical deadline, like a really solid kind of concrete deadline. But I've actually found it to be a really good thing. I guess sort of like Chelsea was just talking about not sort of hanging on to things forever.
Yeah.
I've actually found that quite a constructive thing to be sort of forced in a way to sort of, have a little, that sort of kick up your pants every week, to just sort of do it, to not overthink things sometimes. And I think it's actually been kind of productive to just be like, it's due in 3 days and I've got 3 days worth of drawing to do. So I guess this is the script's finished.
The kill screen's already visible.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just you're walking.
Yeah, it
quickly
becomes kind of
toward it.
quite practical, but still, if you can build into it ways that you can still be creative right up until the moment that you hit send. Sort of learning it as I go. And the topical thing is kind of interesting too. The weekly thing's been a big thing to learn. We're trying each week to, it's current events, so we're trying to sort of deal with a topic that is, saying to someone before we started, sort of slipping into the conversation right at the moment that it comes out, but we have to start working on it a few days before. So you're sort of trying to anticipate where the sort of national conversation's going to be in a couple of days' time. Has been an interesting thing to try and learn too.
Wow, Donald Trump must be just totally keeping you up at night. I guess that's yeah. Courtney, you're writing a book of short stories. Does this mean that you've abandoned us poets for the bright lights of the fiction world?
Honestly, poets are like the mafia. You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised at people who are like, oh, you've gone to the dark side.
Yeah, you can't just walk out.
Like, sorry, I actually need petrol for my car. Guys, like, there's practical stuff out there. I want to have a mortgage one day, and sorry, it's just no. That's, of course, it's not the reason why I've diversified.
Is this a
I actually was publishing short stories before I published poetry at all, and it was about a decade ago now, and I was kind of intoxicated with the short story form. But I wanted to kind of play around with it and be able to put some poetic elements into the mix. I had a few short stories published, and I think my best one was within Pulp. Pulp magazine. Anyone of that age here? And it was for like the summer reads, and that story got chosen, and it was called something very late teens, early 20s, like Technology of the Heart. And it was about like this oh my God, this love affair, and sitting at the summit in Mount Eden with this beautiful Jamaican man and wondering if he loved me or not. Do you love me? Is the love all in the unspokenness between us? So it's a form that I've always appreciated. I mean, some of my favourite writers, like Grace Paley, obviously Ernest Hemingway with those short stories too. The masters, people who are able to kind of lead you down this seemingly beautiful garden path, and then someone's killed. It's like, how does this keep happening in short stories? Alice Munro, I like this character. Oh, you've killed her, So I got to a point, I came home from London last year, and I felt like this great moment was upon me. Like, what will you do? You've done the poetry, you've written some plays. What do you really want to focus on next? And I thought, well, I love this form. I'd like to revisit this form, but I'd also like to pour something different onto the page. So every single piece that I'm working through, and I have to say, I have an amazing team around the book. And before I started to write the book, I put the team together. So obviously, yes, there is an infrastructure for success going on. And so the kill screen is obviously linked to the project team, which is linked to the project. And that's another consideration I have in my mind, that, when people are relying on you to come up with the content, you do kind of step outside of yourself, and you are kind of viewing yourself from the outside, almost cheering yourself on, like, you can do this. You've lived the life to do this. All of those hard experiences, all of the days being poor, oh my God, studying, waiting to be noticed, wondering if your voice has anything unique about it. All of those days go into the mix. So, with the project team, I have Lloyd Jones on board as my manuscript advisor, which has given me an immense distance from myself. He doesn't pull any punches. We met 5 years ago. He's been a very solid presence in my life. But he's also, he's not there to tell me that things look great or sound great. There is nothing about his mentoring which is finessed. He's like, what's going on here? Revisit that. So he's in the mix. I have, my fantastic publishers at Beatnik Publishing who have come on board with the project too. We're talking about it from a design perspective. I'm speaking with different people about how the book will be launched. I have the residency in Silt next year, where I'm hoping the book will be finished by then, will be next to me on the bedside table, and something I'm touring around. I'll be that girl in Berlin, would you like a book? Would you like a book? Take the book home with you. So it's been an interesting process. I feel more like with this project, I'm weaving together things that I, really believe in and things that I really care about, but I have set out the boundaries of this world. I do have people watching and observing and taking note. So I'm not just spiraling off the face of the earth. Otherwise, I probably would.
That's so interesting to hear you talk about this team. Is that, obviously you wrote Rushing Dolls and you have experience in the theater. Is that, I've never heard of a book of short stories having this kind of team behind it. Is that an instinct that you got from working in theater or from working in poetry maybe? Yeah.
Well, I come from a big Samoan family, and I've just always operated in a team. And it's just something that I continue to do, but to be able to reach out to people and say, would you please join me on this project, you have to have the security and the balls, as Toby would say, to accept that people will hold you accountable. They will challenge you. It's not going to be a nice process. It's the opposite.
So would you say that in some way the
But it's very family to me. It's very whānau.
Right. Is the kill screen then, or is that voice in your head that tells you something is finished, actually it's a lot of voices? Is that sort of what you've created for yourself?
Definitely. It's a lot of voices, but at the same time, every piece of work for me it's going into a bigger vision. I have a bigger vision that I'm just kind of feeding into. And I think the team, we're all working collaboratively towards the same kind of inclusive world, and this is just another step towards it. But of course, if something's crap, it's not going in the book. There are stories that I know are just going to be hostage in my computer.
I mean, we
Like,
can
they're not-
have this big event and
Yeah.
talk about endings, but really it's just like, if it's crap, it has
Yeah,
to go, right?
that's true.
That's
That's
the
true.
simple thing. I had the great pleasure of seeing All Your Wants and Needs Fulfilled Forever on Tuesday, and it struck me, as I was sort of jotting down notes for potentially for questions for tonight, a repeated refrain that comes and goes in the play is, the solution lies in the conclusion. Now, how do you square that with a play that you keep rewriting over and over again, and that changes every time?
Well, I don't want to give spoilers, but that's the light bulb's hope, I think, is that the solution lies in the conclusion. For me, like, theatre's never really finished. I think it was interesting talking about deadlines before, and also talking about a team, like, leading you towards a thing. For me, like, I would never get anything done without deadlines, and I would also never get anything done by myself. We're like a family working on this show, and yeah, it's I think that's something that's kind of integral to this show, is the idea of, like, looking for the perfect story, looking for something to be perfect. I'm not sure if I think that's something that we kind of have to keep doing as humans. I'm not sure if it's something that can ever be done. It's almost like it's just our duty and our curse to just kind of keep seeking out these things and keep refining, keep trying to tell the truest story we can tell. Yeah.
Well, does repetition sort of replace revision, or like come to serve essentially the same function?
Well, was it like we were just talking about Murakami just before, and I don't know if he said this himself, but there's someone, I think it was him, he said it himself about, he's always telling the same story. Every single story he's told is the same story, and he's just refining the same story, which I always thought was really interesting. So I think we are kind of just repeating these patterns, I think, a lot of the time, and trying to get them right. And the show itself has taken that form, because we started with a show called The Tinderbox, which is based on a Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale, and we did a Western fantasy musical. And then we did another version of that show, which was very different, and then we completely abandoned the fairy tale and just went, well, no, what's the true thing? What do we want to say? And then we came up with this show, which has nothing to do with Hans Christian Andersen, but it does have a box in it. Very different kind of box. But yeah.
All of you have talked to some extent about collaboration. That it's an illusion to think that you're all kind of isolated artists creating in this vacuum. That you in everything that you do, you're engaging with other people. I'm wondering what happens when somebody else that you're working with sense of an ending, it doesn't align with your own. Like, is there? Yeah, that's something I'm not sure about in my own life, in my own work, because I am very isolated. I'm not doing collaborations at all. So, what is it like when that teammate, as Courtney would say, is on a totally different page?
Unfriend. Unfriend from Facebook. Block.
No, I'm joking.
Just you're out. Just get out.
I had an experience like that, I guess, sort of early on when I was first sort of getting into doing creative stuff, where I was approached by a band to do a music video, and I don't know animation, but I had a friend who did, and I said to them and said to my friend, like, okay, we'll work together and do this project, and it was a bit of an unfriend kind of moment because because my part of it, like, I designed the characters and I storyboarded everything up and kind of wrote the script and sort of set him up to what he needed to do, which took me maybe a month, and then it was a really long song. It's like a 6-minute song or something. So it took him about 6 months, and it was summertime, and I was kind of cruising off to the beach, and I'd get these texts like, I'm going to kill you. So it's tough, yeah.
Either of you had those kind of conflicts, or?
I think, as a writer in the theatre, you're obviously working with a director and, there's a whole team of people who all have a stake in it. So, but I think there's always the night where you just have to put the thing on. So in that sense, it ends no matter what for everyone at a certain point. But then once that's happened and we get a chance to maybe do the show again, then we're refining. And I don't think I've ever worked with anyone who's like, no, we're not going to touch it. It's perfect. It's always, even with film, like I'm just starting to get into screen a little bit, and it's like you get it, and the film goes out there, and then you kind of watch it, and you're just like, God, I wish we could have just tweaked that. You always, it never ends. I've never, and it might be, you might want different things for it, but I've never had a moment where one person's going, that's finished. I don't want to touch it. Yeah.
Can I go back in time for a second?
Please.
I was just thinking about how you. I haven't seen your play, but I have every intention.
Got a few days left, Chelsea.
But just hearing you talk about the kind of looking at the same play and putting it on again, and it's quite different. I feel like that's what I do with every song, but it just requires a little sense of delusion inside me to think that I'm doing something original, even though that's definitely not true. It just like divorces you from a reality where you would be totally debilitated by the idea of starting something totally original and new. Is that like what? It just doesn't sound like you have that delusion, and I need to know the secret. It's like you seem so empowered by the exploration, and I'm just like, okay, it's 3.5 minutes. How are we going to fill this? How am I going to talk about love again? What words can I use? How can I use heart? What can I rhyme it with?
But
like, what revitalizes you to keep exploring the same, not template, but recreating the same template, and not just wanting to move on and just. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because like as a writer writing by myself, I have that problem a lot. Like, I get bored of myself really quickly, and imagine that. But that's why I love devised theatre. Like in terms of making theatre, devising, as much as some people might poo-poo it, that's my that's where I get my kicks. It's just like working with friends and people who are surprising you all the time. We started when we started making this show. We came in with just like we had a few little ideas and some stimuli, and we talked with the cast, and everyone brought their own stories, and we just build from there. And so it's like it's a little piece. Everyone has a little piece of it, and everyone kind of owns a little part of it. And that can be really dangerous if you don't have like leadership. We have a very good leader, Robin Kerr. He's sitting over there.
Do you know anything about music, Robin Kerr?
Yeah. It's just a really exhilarating ride for me. So that's how I keep it feeling original, is just because other people I'm having the fun, and I just get to enjoy them and feel like I'm just like shaping the fun slightly.
Is there such a thing as a devised pop song?
Can you refine the question?
Is the making of a pop song sausage-like, in that a lot of things are going into it from different parts of the animal? I'm sorry if that's totally not how theater works. That's
It's
when
a
you were
sausage.
speaking, I was just
What you
thinking,
said, it's a sausage.
thinking sausage.
I think that I've been in denial about that exact topic, and only now that I've reconciled the concept have I become far more productive. But sorry, can I just keep talking about the other thing?
You guys keep asking permission to talk.
Okay.
It's sort of like what you're here
Jade,
for.
can you? Because I was just thinking that the only instance I can think of when you do that in music maybe is to like keep yourself interested in something that the audience has invested themselves in. Like, for example, you write a hit, and then people expect to hear that at every show you play, even 10 years later. So in order to like keep it fresh for yourself, you reincarnate it in a way that makes you feel excited about it still and slightly recognizable. And scene.
Yeah.
I think collaboration is actually quite tricky, isn't it? Like collaborating in like a true way. Like if there is such a thing as like organic collaboration where you're kind of hanging out with creative people who you really admire and then suddenly you're like, hey, let's work on something together. Often it's inorganic. Often it's like an email in your inbox with someone who kind of gets your work and, you know, and wants some diversity. And they're like, hey, you know, would you like to work on this with me? And I find that coffee you have with them can just save you a lot of kill screens and a lot of heartbreak. So you can sit down together and over coffee just be extraordinarily blunt.
Right.
Like, I am actually interested in these things. You know, this is my creative process. You may think it's finished, I may not. You know, and if we do a show somewhere, like when I was in London, people just have very different creative processes. Like you agree to do a show, there are other artists involved in the show. In the lead up to the show, you have your own process. So I'm, to a degree, ready to go. I know what the show's about. I know why we're putting it on. But that's not the same for everyone else involved. You know, that people want to go walk around in the space. People want to meet beforehand to talk about it. And those are just different creative processes that other people have that you try really hard to cater to. But sometimes it is difficult to meet those special needs that other people have so that you can kind of come together.
Right on. I'd like to hear Toby talk about his work with Toby Manhire, that difficult person, I imagine, to work with.
Are you in the audience tonight, Toby Manhire?
Is he here?
Yeah, that would change my answer slightly. No, he's been really good. It's a relatively new thing. So I mean, we've been doing that now for about 6 weeks, so it's pretty new. But it's interesting what you're saying about meeting for a coffee, because that was one thing when the idea was sort of proposed to us that we would do this thing together. He was very much like, this is only going to work if we can actually sit and talk face to face. Like, how are we logistically going to do that? And that's been right, I think. Like, in talking face to face is how we can work together better. It is kind of both really separate what we both do. Like, he's writing and I'm illustrating, obviously, but each week, and we're sort of learning as we go, we're trying to work out ways that we can integrate what we're doing so it's as seamless as we can. Like, he can ask a question in writing that I can answer with drawing, or I can change the topic with the drawing that he can pick up in the writing straight afterwards or whatever. So that's still pretty new, but that collaboration is something that is probably the most interesting part about it, I guess. Well, there's lots of interesting things, but that's kind of the new thing to be learning out of it.
Yeah, what struck me when I first encountered it was the question. It was the kind of the conversational nature of it, the way there's like a question posed and then the response, and your illustrations in some ways are also responses to questions that are asked, and that seemed like a really useful form to arrive at to deal with some of the problems potentially the collaboration brings up.
Yeah, it's and it gives us a format that becomes like a skeleton to build out from as well. Like, we're not starting from absolute scratch each week. We've got a sort of I don't know, think of it almost like the drum beat or something that we're filling in the other parts around. That at least is a starting point. That's sort of, because we're working so quickly each week. We're not reinventing the wheel every single time.
Sounds like an exquisite corpse drawing.
Yeah, kind of, actually. Yeah. I love those. The exquisite corpse is cool. It's a good way to put it, I think. Yeah.
Eli, to change pace a bit. One of the motifs, the central motifs in your play, is the hero's journey, which is interesting. You know, in the context of, I'm surprised at how much collaboration has come up, and we're not really talking about ourselves. We're talking about this group of people that we're working with. The hero's journey, in some ways, is this like archetype of singularness, though. It's this kind of the hero who ventures forth into the unknown, crosses a threshold, confronts the abyss. There's a death, a rebirth, and then a return transformed. If it's not the hero's journey, but the artist's journey, and you're the artist. Can you talk about some of those phases in your development, in your life as an artist?
Some of the phases, like going through the...
Yeah, what's your abyss?
The abyss?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Oh, sorry, I forgot about this thing. Man, I don't know. The abyss, I'd say, like, I mean, there's definitely an abyss in the devising process. The late night, kind of a week out from the show when you don't have anything. And everyone's really angry at each other. And I've been through various abysses, and they're of varying degrees of toughness. Some of them just absolutely nightmarish, but they're kind of what make it. You really feel alive, and you come out the other side really ready to atone with the Father. I don't know what that bit is, but it's funny that because I do think that is to some extent the hero's journey is kind of a lie, maybe. I don't know. Maybe that's just how I feel about it personally. It's probably quite subjective, but and that it's not. It's about this kind of lone person going through life, and really like a lot of the time it's about connection, and like art comes from connection, and if you try and be this sort of lone kind of person struggling alone, it can be quite. I mean, but it's like some people do that, and they're absolutely just that's their thing.
There's a great African proverb about this thing exactly. What is it? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
That makes sense. Courtney, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was the with this connecting with what you just said. When I saw you perform some of the poems from Brown Girls in Bright Red Lipstick a few years ago at the Auckland Writers Festival, what struck me was how much the audience and their enthusiasm was like a part of the poem. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's obviously what you've written, which is one level, and that's skillful, and then there's also the performance, which is like adds a whole other dimension. But then there's like the audience being there, reciprocating. So it's almost like this loop, that you're a part of. Is that? I guess what I'm trying to imagine your writing process, like when you're sitting down at your notebook or your computer trying to write these poems. Are you like considering the audience in knowing how to make the poem and how to finish it?
Interesting question, Steve.
Thank you. I was really proud of that.
No, that
one.
is. It's like, it's very layered. When I kind of hit my teens, and we start doing the serious study within English at school, and English was always my favourite subject. You just kind of thrashed out with James K. Baxter, who I love. I love you, James, if you're in the room. And you feel this overwhelming sense that, New Zealand literature is this still condensed, beautiful male presence almost. And once I got into university and I was studying English there and creative writing there, I was feeding in the library. I was literally just going through books and books and books trying to find myself. Versions of myself that I found were still inside of the kitchen looking out at the garden, and I wanted to be in the garden. I think the interesting thing for me about audience connection with the work is when I was first kind of embarking upon where to put my voice, or what energy to put into my voice. I just had this overwhelming desire to kind of create these little constellations above me that I could kind of work myself towards, because they weren't in the physical world. So the brown girl in bright red lipstick, and the rushing doll who just takes no shit, and she's sassy and sexy, and she's out there, she's empowered, she's smart, she's travelled. These kinds of women that I really wanted to be and I wanted to write about. It was just a very personal connection that I had with the work, and when I started to actually perform them They came from a very real place. The first poem I ever performed is called, no motorbikes, no golf. And it was literally me driving past a park in Weymouth out in South Auckland, and that was the sign. The sign was like, no motorbikes, no golf. And I was like, what the fuck? It's Weymouth, man. Who was out here playing golf? I've never seen anyone. I was going to visit some family. I was also working on a film with Fox Studio, and we had one of the High School Musical girls here. And she just seemed as voiceless as many of the young women that I had seen in South Auckland. And I just desperately wanted to start moving towards a place that didn't exist. So I thought maybe it could exist on the page. And other people, it turns out, wanted that world to exist too. So it's just been a bonus that when I'm talking about these things that interest me, that other people are like, hey, I feel like that too. Mm. I never thought it would connect with African women, Indonesian women, Native American, Indian women as well. I just never ever thought I would get the kind of messages that I've gotten from around the world, or women saying, your book makes me feel powerful. It was just me and your book in my bag when I left this shitty relationship. Or I came home, I felt like crap, or who knows, or me and my husband came home, we read that and we had a great time. But you never know. You never know. So I'm interested in these things. I put them out there, and it just excites me that it turns out there is an audience for it.
Fantastic. We're gonna open up to audience questions in just a few minutes. But before we do, and while you come up with questions to ask, I wanted to ask another question to all of you. Is there a work of art that you have not yourself created, that you love because it's unfinished? Don't all answer at the same time.
Can I?
Yeah, you go.
I clearly need to read your books. I've talked about this incessantly for the past couple of weeks since it came out, but the Carly Rae Jepsen album, I think it's so brilliant. It's so brilliant as a pop album. Who has heard it? Yeah, you. Yes. But part of the reason I have such adoration for it is because it's made decisions that I wouldn't have made, and I still don't feel comfortable with those decisions when I'm listening to it. It separates me from the work in a way that it makes me feel like a peer of the work, and not like I'm an adoring fan, or like, worshipping at an altar of something that I can never achieve. It feels like because I've like the vocabulary that I was talking about developing before, it makes me feel like it has developed to a point that I can identify things in artworks that aren't mine, that don't alienate me from them anymore.
Well, in comics, I guess there's lots of unfinished works because of the nature of it, often people are serializing things. And one that sort of I would think of as when I first started reading New Zealand comics, there was a comic called Pickle by Dylan Horrocks, and he sort of had two storylines going in that, one of which ended up being his book Hicksville, which is sort of his most sort of famous thing that people would know, and another one was called Cafe Underground. And I was totally reading each issue for Cafe Underground, and about halfway through he stopped and just started doing Hicksville.
Stop making it completely.
Yeah, I guess he just sort of, one of them started taking his fancy, or, he started sort of getting lost in that sort of story and stopped telling the other one. And at the time, like I was just a teenager, but reading each issue as it came out, it drove me crazy at wanting to know what happened in the story. Like it was halfway through the story, it was about this kind of Auckland nightlife kind of scene, and these characters were really cool, and it dropped. The story stopped like right when one of the characters was like, it was this sort of domestic kind of drama, and then all of a sudden one guy was like, you know what? I reckon one of the characters is a vampire. And that was like the cliffhanger kind of ending. And I was like, come on. And so I started writing him letters being like, just Was he just crazy, or was he just like? Because it was also, it drove me crazy.
That sounds heartbreaking.
Yeah, at the time I was really bummed about it, but I look back on it now and I actually kind of love it more. Like, it means more to me, way more now, that story, because it wasn't finished, because I got to imagine how it finished, I guess. Then it would have probably been pretty, if I saw the next issue, it probably wouldn't have been that big a deal, you know? The fact that it was unfinished sort of lent it this sort of mythology, I guess.
Plays in development, unfinished works. I'm kind of in a bit of a hub of half-finished, semi-finished, quarter-finished, just begun kind of work. I actually work at MIT in the arts faculty, so I'm constantly kind of ducking my head in and out of rooms where people are part way through something. I'm quite connected with lots of different young artists around the world who like to send me their, manuscripts or applications for universities. They get halfway through and then they're like, well, I'm never getting into Harvard. I'm just gonna put that in the junk. So I can't really pick. What I can say though is that I know that space, and I think it's a really important place to try and stay connected to the unfinishedness of work. I've got a new play that I wrote recently, and it's clearly unfinished. It's only half of the work that I've done, and it's out there being read by a few people now, and that gives me a little ripple of, oh my God, what am I doing? But also I think as like an emerging artist or a mid-career artist, or the vocabulary that we put around where you are in your career, I don't really know how much I want to emerge, because once you become established, there's this idea that everything you create is finished and whole and complete, and maybe that's not where the innovation or where the ideas, or there's something in that just to stay connected to.
Right, there's something charming about potential, right?
Oh, yeah.
As soon as that's sort of, even if it's still there, but we don't talk about it anymore in that way,
Yeah.
there's something that's kind of lost.
I'm sure there are books out there that feel half finished when you're reading them. I've read a few, I'm not going to say those books are. But it interests me to, at some point in my career, collaborate with a bunch of artists perhaps who'd like to just look at a show or a publication or a film where it is just, you get to the midpoint, just cut it. I think that would be something I'd like to experience.
Eli, do you have a favorite unfinished
That's
artwork?
cool. That made me think of many things. I was going to say I didn't have anything. I was trying to think, like, especially with TV, all the shows that have finished prematurely, how frustrating it is. But then I recently finished X-Files, and I wish that they hadn't finished it. And
that's another question though. It's like, I wish this was unfinished.
Yeah, and I think
Jump
and
the shark.
It happens with books as well. It's like it was like J.K. Rowling's like writing more Harry Potter. And you just go, no, don't. What are you doing? Yeah, like there, people often think things aren't finished when they should be finished. Which is kind of similar to what you were saying. But yeah, I mean, that's an interesting thing. Like, often the mystery is so much a part of something you're doing, and then you realize that you love something that's very mysterious, and you realize that the artist really wants to explain everything, and they start doing it, and you go, no, don't. End at season 4. I don't care.
Because season 5, the season that's never filmed, could have been really great.
Yeah,
We'll
but
never know, but it probably would have been great.
It's the thing, like, it could have been really great. That is like what makes it so great, I think.
Or like fandom that is totally uninterruptible. So like when you were speaking, I was thinking about being on like somebody I like's IMDb page, like Tina Fey's IMDb page, and it's like, oh, you've got some stuff coming out, eh? Yep, gonna love that. Already? You can't fail.
I didn't even watch the last episode of True Blood because I was that invested. Like, I will not let myself. Because for me it's like, no, I'm just going to keep that going in my mind.
Right.
They're
it's
all
never
living
gonna
happily.
Be as good as I can imagine.
They're fine. They found a way to live peacefully as vampires.
Thank you, guys. I think that was a pretty good place to turn to the audience. I can't see you, so if you raise your hand, can I get the lights down a wee bit? Does anybody have a question for our... Thank you.
Hi, Steve. I'd love to know more about you.
What? No. That was not. I didn't write anything for that.
What are you talking about? We talked about this right before. We talked about the book that you were making that's out at
That was
Time Out.
networking with you privately.
Where can we buy the book?
At Time Out Books in Mount Eden and at the University Bookstore on Simon Street and at Unity in Wellington. Any other questions? Sure.
Hi. Toby, I wanted to ask you a question. This question is twofold. One is that you in your cartoons, you look a lot younger than you are. I was like...
In the cartoon, I look
Audience
younger or
questions are
now?
painful, man.
Sorry, we were discussing it the other
Okay.
day. And I was wondering-
Skinnier in the
Is
cartoons
that
too.
what you look like? Yeah.
But the other question I wanted to ask is in the one that you did with other Toby, lesser Toby,
Yeah.
where with the refugees, the refugee dad actually looks like you as well, like TBA. So I was just wondering, like, with putting yourself in the work, do you think there's going to be a kill screen for that? Like, is that going to end, or are you always part of it?
I guess it's something that I'm learning as I go as well. Like, I guess all of my projects for the last kind of 5 years or so have been kind of autobiographical. Like, before I was doing Pencil Sword, I did a book called Don't Puke on Your Dad, which was about my experience of being a father. And before that, I did a book called Aladdux, which was about living in Amsterdam. I'm sort of learning as I go where to draw the line between me as the character and me as my actual real life. And sort of constantly defining that as I go, because there's times that it's like way too much for me it feels like oversharing or something when I put too much of myself into the comics, but then those are things that people have really responded to as well, so I'm sort of trying to find out where to draw the line, particularly with like relationships and stuff. I'm happy to draw pictures of myself being pooed on and puked on, which is basically what that book is about. But it's different slightly when it's your friends and when it's my partner and when it's my children and things like that too. That's one thing I'm sort of working out as I go as well, like where to cut that off, I guess.
Probably have time for one more question.
I wondered if any of you have ever revived stuff that you previously abandoned?
Apparently that's a really good question.
I've definitely had things that I've returned to again and had had attempts at. Like you have a sort of a vague idea of something and you start, there's sort of that different phase of sort of conceptualizing something and executing it. And definitely there's been concepts that I've tried in a number of ways to execute and sort of started to do and be like, it's not quite right. And then sort of come back to it later points, I guess.
Others?
I was tasked with somebody else's song to write on, and basically I've never worked this way. They sent me a complete backing track and then asked me to write a top line on it, which is the melody, the lyrics, and the structure. And I really learned about patience, especially, and there's that concept of like, if you're getting annoyed with someone, it's probably that you're annoyed with something in yourself. And I was just so like rage filled that I couldn't understand their like audible language. But after I kind of relaxed against that, and after months of procrastinating and not being able to understand it, I wrote the best thing I think I've ever written.
When I had my residency in Berlin, I was just this like freak of nature. I went through like 3 journals. It was my very first ever moleskin when I arrived. It was there on my bed. And, the manager of the residency had written in neat places for me to go. And so I felt like I should go to everywhere in the journal. And so I wanted so much to kind of capture everything that I was experiencing when I came home, I kind of transposed it all into just a single kind of Word doc, and I just hated it. I was like, this is just crap. It's just my day, what I had for breakfast, and then these moments like, oh my God, I went here, I saw this and this and this. And I couldn't really look at it for like 9 months, 8 months, 9 months. And then I opened it up again. I extracted the parts that I thought were really important, and it became a 20-piece sequence of poems called Silvertip. And Silvertip went on to be published within the Landfall edition for Frankfurt, and it was, 4 pages of my ribs. That's what it felt like. It felt like reading something I had truly lived through. But revisiting things, going back to the scene of the crime, it just sometimes takes a long time to see that it's actually quite beautiful, or to see that the frame of mind you were in was interesting.
Growth in a new context, it's a different thing.
Yeah, I look at some things now that I wrote a long time ago, and I think, oh wow, I wish I'd known then what I was doing, because I can't get back to that point, of being so unconsciously kind of just stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have similar stuff to that, of looking back and stuff that I have been through a phase of being really cringy about, and then looking at it again in a new light and being like, oh, and also, I didn't even know what I was, no idea what I was doing. But I've never, I have things that are like lying dormant that I always plan to kind of look at again and get, but then they always feel like, often when I go back, and it's just never time, and and then the longer it takes for me to kind of, the less relevant they become to me also.
So they become like practice at a point, like you're sort of happy with them being something you tried, and now but you can recognize their incompletion needs to stay that way.
Yeah, maybe. Although I don't know, like maybe the process isn't finished yet. Maybe it just needs more time, and then in a few years, or I don't know. Yeah.
We all need more time.
Right.
With that, can we quickly give a huge round of applause for these amazing people?